Okay, we are a little bit over no, and we have some more people joining. So I think we'll start now with the intro and also, and afterwards I'll introduce the team of the executive committee of Nick and John. But now let's introduce at length our initiative. Okay, very well. The Free and Safe in Cyberspace. It's a conference that we've been organizing for 6 years, and in Brussels, in New York, in Brazil, then in Brussels again, in Berlin, in Geneva. It all came from one concept, one idea. I mean, in the recent news about cybersecurity and surveillance and 9/11 and the NSA surveillance of 2013, it became clear that over these years, humanity has been faced with a stark choice, choosing either be safe against terrorism or get privacy. You have to choose either of these things, or we need to balance them. And over time, we've seen that the need of security were really high, and privacy and civil rights were sacrificed, and we voted that to continue. And that has created huge problem, which in turn affect public safety. And so this sacrifice of privacy has created also public safety, and it's really not sustainable. And so we created the name Free and Safe in Cyberspace, because these two needs of society need to be reconciled somehow. And this is the crucial question of our current time and our future time. Unless we merge these and we get both security and civil rights in cyberspace, we may not have democracy, freedom, and we may not have a positive future with AI. So what are we about? We are building the Trustless Computing Certification Body and CivicNet, which is a sort of resulting product. The Trustless Computing Certification Body is a new standard setting and certification body which is democratic, competent, resilient, independent, whose goal is to standardize, certify, and regulate hardware and software systems which are mandatory interoperable, and together will create a human communication sphere, CivicNet. So it will be a set of technologies which will be parallel to the existing digital sphere of communication, which is definitely not up to our democratic ideal and freedom ideals, that will in parallel be able to be used by anyone to promote a democratic interaction among humans. So the goal of the certification body and CivicNet is to create radically unprecedented levels of confidentiality, integrity, and democratic control over our digital life, at least our private digital lives, because we will not renounce to others. And this must be done concurrently while enabling lawful access, because unless this new sphere and new standards also enable lawful access, it will never be accepted. It will never go to market. It will never let be. And so this is a challenge we have in front of us, and we've been building this this is the goal that we've been pursuing. Okay, let me start from my news, which maybe some of you have not heard. In 2017, a California man of 56 years old drove with his pickup truck to a stadium and pulled out a drone and had it fly on a stadium and flew leaflets of advertising of its shop. And then he took the car, drove an hour and a half, went to another stadium, and again dropped leaflet on all the stadium. Well, this was of notice because basically instead of leaflets, these could have been chemical agents, and there could have been tens of thousands dead. This is something that anyone can do. Adapting a drone, a civilian drone, can be adapted to be carrying deadly weapons, and so this is an example of the fact that we live in a very dangerous world. Now, we live in a world in which the smaller number of people with smaller amounts of money and funds can create more and more harm. And we have, for example, in the nuclear, it's always been a problem, and synthetic biology, but even in the cyber world. And so this is something that is a trend. And of course, we don't have to mention terrorism. Even more widely, there is a theorist called Nick Bostrom, which is one of the most renowned theorists of AI safety. He's been quoted and cited by Bill Gates and by Elon Musk several times, and he is the greatest expert in AI safety and security. And he has a theory which is widely been shared, that we live in a vulnerable world. So the inventions of nuclear bombs and energy, the invention of even cryptography in a way, but then also synthetic biology, nanotechnology. So some scientific discoveries that we have that pop up out of the evolution are actually extremely dangerous. And we're already seeing some of those, and we will see more. So we live in a world that is vulnerable, in which there are certain discoveries which need to be kept under check. One of them is the strong encryption, and so this is something that is not going away. So the world is dangerous, is going to be more dangerous. Smaller number of people can do more harm, and so this is something that we have to reckon with. The result of this is the fact that we learned in January 2020 that even Jeff Bezos, the richest person in the world, which has tens of millions of euros of dollars, because he has dollars, not euros, to protect his safety, his privacy, and so on, he was hacked by a Saudi prince using tools which are very expensive, which are made by certain companies, and taking advantage of holes which are in the technologies that are used. There was a news a few weeks earlier, when Trump got elected, that there was a study of the communication of Trump with his close associates, personal associates, and it came out that, of course, these associates were using normal phones and not specific, NSA phones, and so this communication weren't that secure, and the phones of the recipients could be hacked, and so anyone could actually spy the connection, the conversation between Trump and close associates, which were not classified. So these are two examples that, because of the fact that it's so dangerous, even the richest person in the world or the most powerful person in the world cannot access confidentiality and security on their private communication. And that's because that cannot be let be. So this is how these news are connected. So again, the core issue here is this choice between freedom and safety. And even after learning, after the revelation of Snowden, the amount of surveillance that we're under, all the governments have been voted, just minor changes happened and nothing really changed then. So given a stark choice, we chose safety rather than freedom. And so it's a key problem. So we're here to learn 3 ideas whose time has come. And so the basic ideas of TCCB are that meaningful personal freedom and public safety in cyberspace are not a trade-off in a zero-sum game, but a both or neither challenge. And solving this challenge is fundamental to retain liberty and democracy in society, and also to realize the opportunities of the upcoming age of AI and stay off bad scenarios. So it's not an either or, something to balance. There's no balance to find. We need to find win-win solutions, and that is the only way to do it. How do we do it? So this challenge can be solved by applying to both IT systems that we want to this level of security and lawful access mechanisms the same extreme battle-tested safeguards, both technical and organizational, that we have applied to other systems. For example, on nuclear safety, or the electoral process, where you have 5 randomly selected citizens which are present and make sure that your vote is not thrown in the trash, or some new votes are put in. And also we need an ultra-resilient democratic governance body that will govern these safeguards and standards, which are complicated. There's going to be bias in it, there could be influence and so on. So you need a global governance body that is isolated. And the third element is that most experts believe that cybersecurity is a technical problem that will be solved via technical innovation. We're always promised that AI will, quantum will either provide unbreakable encryption, or the contrary, or blockchain is going to solve security and privacy, and they've never done it, because cybersecurity of critical system is not a technical problem. It's 100% an organizational design one. So the proper technologies are a hugely consequential byproduct of proper organization. So at the end of the day, it's all about the organization design that you have there that will produce cybersecurity and proper innovation and implementation of technical both standards and technology, which is to the levels needed. So we're building basically a social contract. Back in over 200 years ago, Jean-Jacques Rousseau said, man is born free and everyone is in chain. And he theorized the social contract, which became the basis of the creation of liberal democracy. So man was born free, everyone was in chain. Then we at least in the West, we aggregated in liberal democracies, and we conquer our freedom back by contributing our freedoms to a social contract, and in return getting our freedoms back. Let's see how it works, how the social contract works. So we start with us alone having absolute freedom of speech, absolute freedom of self-defense, and shooting my neighbor if he's really pissing me off, an absolute freedom of something else. Well, with a social contract, you confer this theoretical freedom, because this freedom are only theoretical, because I have freedom of self-defense. But if my neighbor has a bigger gun or has a worse temper, it's just theoretical. And freedom of speech, same thing. I could be stopped. So with a social contract, you confer this absolute right to a social contract together, and you receive back more freedom. So you give away some freedom, but you receive more back. Not only that, but these freedoms and these rights, which are handled by the social contract, by a democratic institution that we have in nations now, also creates a positive feedback loop between these rights, because by having safety, I'm also I have freedom of speech, because I can speak without the risk of someone wanting to kill me or hurt me because I'm saying certain things. And so there's no trade-off or balance between these rights, but there are win-win solutions. And so ultimately, this produces a scenario in which you have much more levels of freedom, of both safety and civil freedoms with a social contract. So we achieved that. This is the greatest progress of humanity, has been this invention of social contract, democratic structure. But as more of our life moved to the global cyberspace, we're back to square one without any social contract. It's now more than 50% of our time is spent online, largely unregulated space, dominated by a few huge giants and a few nations that hack in and so on and so forth. And there's no social contract. And that is exactly what we're aiming to build. It's going to be a small thing. It's going to be initially for a niche, but that's exactly what's missing, and that's exactly what we're building. So the Trustless Computing Association, the really basics is we established in 2015 in Italy. We since May we are a Swiss entity in Geneva. We created 3 EU R&D initiatives to build the Trustless Computing Certification Body and Seevik Net, and our first device compliant. And we aggregated over 25 partners, including 2 nation states. And also we have an incredible list of advisors, governance and scientific. We spin off a startup in 2019 to fundraise TCCB and build the first compliant open base. We organized 8th edition of the Free and Safe in Cyberspace about TCCB, and also to create a wider community around consensus about how to reconcile security and privacy. And we also have a publication published. So this is really the elevator pitch on our association. And okay, we have executive committee. Thanks so much, Nick and John. John has been on board since 2015. He's been coordinating all the, together with me, all the initial R&D initiatives, bringing together this amazing partner. He's also president of EMI, which is a European-wide leading organization of e-identity leaders, and he's a great person as well. Nick Kelly joined about a year and a half ago. He's been a fan for a long time, and he brings 360-degree vision, holistic, which is very needed as far as geostrategic view or no, governance, scientific. So it really brings a very wide strategy. We have a pretty amazing advisory board with professors from Stanford, Princeton, EU Commission, official from the EU Commission, Europol, former, and then we have executive of top banks or even from giants like Huawei, Barclays Bank, Erste Group, the largest bank in UK. We have a scientific advisory group with deep expert from military grade security, from the former chairman of the board of cybersecurity for the World Economic Forum, Unisys. Then we have PwC. So we have even on AI. So we have pretty amazing advisory board. And the R&D partners include, as I said, 2 nation states, the largest cybersecurity industry association of Europe, EXO, used to be called EOS, and major universities, the largest EU AI research organization. And so we really created an amazing lineup of R&D partners. So why we're called trustless? Maybe I could refer to a statement by Biden just a few weeks ago when he had his meeting with Putin. Someone said, so do you trust Putin? He said, this is not about trust. This is about self-interest and verification of self-interest. Many decades ago, Reagan, after making a deal with Russia, he said, trust but verify, about the deals they did for arms control. Well, after many decades, most of those treaties failed, and they were nullified without anyone being able to tell who was at fault. So at the end, I think there's a recognition that it's trust or verify. So having a layer of blind trust is preventing to have the right rules and the right verification in place. Another statement on trustworthiness. Basically, last month, the Deputy National Security Advisor, Ann Neuberger, announced an executive order after SolarWinds, this huge hack in the US. She said about current IT standards that if you are going to buy a network management software like SolarWinds, and we want to buy the software that is most secure, we have no way of assessing which that is. So she's not saying that standards are not good enough. She's saying that they're basically worthless. And so this is a situation that explains how basically there's a wide consensus even at the highest level of the US that this is a problem. There's also a hint of the fact that the US government itself and all the other governments that are pursuing the same are also at fault, because there are data that the NSA revelations of Snowden revealed about the NSA compromising the standards of RSA encryption standards, and she was asked about that, and she declined to confirm or to deny, as they always do. And so, but there is quite a few trends to basically conclude that the standards are broken by design. They're broken or weakened because of the need to promote public safety before anything else. So let's move on. Okay, so this is a little bit about the free and safe in cyberspace. As I said, we have it in Brussels, in New York, in Brazil. We had really amazing speakers participating, so it's been a really incredible journey, and we had a lot of contribution. And all these events also informed the publishing in 2018 of a position paper for the Trustless Computing Certification Body, which in very fine detail goes to counter many of the academic objections to this, and what we're doing both on the level of security and both on the level of lawful access. So we welcome you to go and look at it. There's been many organizations that have supported our event series over the years, and so it's too long to mention. I'm sure you're going to recognize some of the icons, and so that's why we have the icons. So from the UN and EU and European Defense Agency and so on and so forth. So these are just some of the top speakers we've had. The representative of privacy, UN, the most famous security cryptographer of Europe, Bart Preneel, head of Ministry of Interior of Germany, and so anyway, very high speakers both on the governmental and IT security experts, and so we've had these kind of contributions. So again, here just to remind our elevator pitch of what we're building, and so just to get a shared idea. So let's move on. Okay, let's get a little quick history of encryption, because there is a lot of deception, a lot of misunderstanding of what's been happening in the issue of encryption. So we'll run a very quick history. So up until 1940s, encryption has been something used by governments and with very I mean, especially the digital encryption with very bulky systems. During the World War II, there has been huge advances both on encryption and also breaking encryption with machines, technologies, and actually it gave birth to the computers, because they needed more computers to make better encryption and also to break more encryption. And so after the World War, this continued escalating. And so this was not widely publicized because every nation had an interest to keep hidden all the capabilities, but became a key for geopolitical dominance. So this went on pretty much all along the Cold War up until around 1993, when basically unbreakable encryption is the order of things is a little bit so the key thing is that unbreakable encryption became widely available, open source and so on. And so pretty much anyone could actually use a stock computer, install an open source software, and communicate in an unbreakable with encryption which were unbreakable at the time, with anyone else. And this posed, of course, a huge problem both for crimes but also for use by governments, that there could be enemies. So Biden at the time was a legislator. He was the first signer of a draft proposal for lawful access, which didn't get in detail, but it was going in that direction that it was needed. The government at the time went ahead and created a voluntary backdoor, a front door system, which was a chip that was to be installed in certain devices and so on. And this was a big fail. This gave the start to the crypto wars, because many saw this as a great danger for privacy, because there was a lot of excitement about this encryption that enabled anyone to communicate privately through digital means, and so there was this started this contrast between these two camps. Government, since the Clipper chip didn't go through and nothing similar could, the only way they could solve that problem was to start breaking all IT and all IT standards to prevent going dark. So since they couldn't stop anymore, unbreakable encryption to be widely used, they needed to ensure that all available technologies and all available standards would be broken, so that either they could access information before it's encrypted or after it's decrypted, or that encryption would not be implemented properly. And so this has been done very extensively, and this is basically many governments have worked on that. So it's been a breaking party since then, and so very understandable. Is there's no maliciousness. It was the only way to retain access, visibility against crime, against enemies. So we arrived to the year 2000. There was a great, the boom of internet. A great expectation that internet could become, freedom, democracy. Anybody could be a newspaper. We're all connected. There was great expectation, and there were also movements around the world, promoting international democracy, international justice. In World Social Forum in Porto Alegre, first 12,000, then the next year 30,000, then 150,000. Then there were movement of 12 million. So there was huge expectation the internet would bring freedom, democracy, and well-being. Fast forward 2021, Facebook, Twitter, and we have all the problem we have: cyber criminals, crime, and so this is the situation we have. So this promise has been widely disattended. So we have in a world in which is ruled by state and non-state hacker. Is a hacker republic, I call it, and there are $6 trillion of estimated cybercrime cost, and that is only the cost. Now there's also many other non-quantifiable things, which is democracy, sovereignty, civil rights, and so on.
Onhandig. Waarom is dat?
Dat is wel onhandig inderdaad.
Peter, can you please unmute? Can you please mute one of the the attendees. Thank you. So we come now to year 2020 and 21, in which with COVID, there's been a tech boom because everyone was at home, more use of technology, their stock got bigger, more investment, more the big technology, big tech controlling the economy and controlling us, and we're even more exposed because we can't avoid using technology and go and meet someone in person. We just have to use technology. So all of these contradictions have been accelerated usually now, and it's been fast forwarding a future which we need to give a direction to. We need to steer before it's too late. So in fact, if we look at 2020, 2060, it's all going to be about this huge increase in technological progress driven by AI and IT, which also is going to drive scientific progress in other areas. And so we have huge risks related to nanotechnology, to synthetic biology, to just a leak from a lab, where something is being studied or maybe done maliciously, or autonomous weapons, and so all of this are going to be getting greater. Even AI itself could actually become an existential risk. You have climate. But in front of us, we also have this great opportunity. I mean, the productivity and that AI can bring could actually eliminate scarcity. It can eliminate manual work. It could really make so that we could just express ourselves, have the most human lives, and have computers work for us, like you see that in the picture. So we're really facing an incredible time in history, like probably never before, since the invention of life. And this is going to, and the answer is going to be how we're going to do it. Who is going to control AI and IT? Richard Hawkins said, in the short term, it's about who is going to control. In the long term, is if we can control. So the who and creating a global social contract on IT is key to this future that we want to control, and not being controlled by a few, just money-making, dozens of individuals. Okay, there's a huge demand, for example, for this level of security. So not only is a problem, but there's a huge demand. So this can be driven. So this initiative that we're bringing forward can be driven by this huge demand. So the high net worth individuals together have like 53 trillion in assets, and their second greatest concern is cybersecurity, because if the more money you have, the bigger the cybersecurity problem becomes. Because of course, the more money you have, the more you could use it for nefarious ends, or maybe give it to ISIS. U.S. citizens fear cybercrime more than any other crime. So there's a huge unmet demand that can drive the standards and really drive this to really become a new paradigm. So the current situation, as we saw there, basically, if you're a rich individual, very rich, or family office, you have to just live with cybersecurity, like rain and lightning. So it's a situation where you can do nothing about it. You cannot throw money at it. There's nothing in the market. So this brings us to a really key aspect. So where is this insecurity coming from? We have literally the problem of why stuff is insecure is that things are too complex. We have hundreds of millions of lines of code, and then you have obscurity. You have codes which are not given for independent review. You have supply chains which are really complicated across different countries with no sufficient level of control. That is the literal problem, right? The factual, material problem. But it's really ultimately a technical problem, because we solved exactly those problems in federal aviation, commercial aviation. Nowadays, only 1 out of 16 million flights results in an accident. There's only 300 people per year that die on airplane accidents. We are incredibly good at security engineering, safety engineering, and certifications, because you have certifications that make sure this happens. On nuclear, we have 17 nuclear nations since 7 years, and we're still alive. And meanwhile, there's 1.5 phones made every year, each one of these hackable by a teenager from Ukraine, but it could be other Eastern European countries. So this is not a technical problem. Standards and technology are broken by design, because there's a more important public good to be preserved, which is safety, or even possibly the perception of safety, and so on. So So basically, as we said before, in the aviation, we nailed it. In nuclear, we nailed it. In IT, the system was never broken. It was built this way. So it was by design. It was not meant to promote this level of confidentiality and even integrity. And especially after 9/11, as we said, we're given a stark choice between privacy and safety, and Western citizens, even after Snowden, voted for safety rather than privacy. And I have 2 kids, I have a family. If I'm given a stark choice, I would also vote for safety. And so this cannot work. This cannot be sustainable for democracy and civil freedoms. Again, no, it's not a question that can be even asked. There's not even a question mark at the bottom of this image. So if we go literally, why are current IT security certifications improper? Well, they're not certifying a complete system, an IT experience. They're certifying certain components. They don't certify the entire life cycle. If you update a system, that's a backdoor. That's the definition of a backdoor, right? Because if you don't know anything about this update, it's a backdoor. And it often doesn't include enough or deeply enough the hardware and fabrication phases. It's subject to crypto standards, which are defined at the national level, some of the top standards, which usually want to have a backdoor that would only be accessible to them. And there's a lot of complexities and also unwittingly creating problems for the governments that create them. And many times systems are depending on other systems for their security, which are not being certified to the same security. And they're very slow and costly, developed in opaque ways. So this is affects one or more of this, all the other existing certifications. So the current solutions, so we could actually look at the inadequacy of current solution primarily in 2 axes. One, to what extent a IT provider has a full control of the IT chain? Because if I want to use IT, I need to have an hardware device and with software running on it, and somebody else has to have a hardware device with software running on it, at least. And then you may have a server component there. So unless you have a full control of this, the weakest link is going to characterize the level of security. So basically, some of these control the whole supply chain, but is just too complex. And so you don't have enough complexity. Or you have application like Signal or Trima, they're extremely secure, they're verified, open source, but they're only an application. So an application can never be more secure than the device it runs on. And here, red, we have a backdoor barrier. So this is an area where nations of the world would not let companies go beyond this level of security because this could create major public security issues. But this is where we want to go. But of course, we need to embed in there the lawful access requirements. So the key of the Trustless Computing Certification Body are 4 unique safeguards is transparency. So 4 things that no other certification does. Transparency of all the critical components, hardware and software, are publicly inspectable at the very least, if not open source. Not only are inspectable, but extremely inspected in relation to complexity. And that's a key, and also by ethically aligned experts, because otherwise people could find bugs and sell it in the markets. There's a unique oversight that includes a citizen witness and citizen juries in key moments of this life cycle, including the legitimate lawful access, which would require law enforcement to show up in person in a certain location and convince 5 randomly selected citizens and an attorney of this. Of course, there's much more complication to this, and we'll go into that later on in the event. All of this is certified by a certification body which is trustworthy because of its governance, which is accountable democratically, ethical, and technically proficient. So ultimately, the key of all is going to be really the governance, and the quality of the governance. So we're a little bit running behind, but so I'm going to speed up. So the solution is, this certification body, which certifies extreme levels of security and also certifies the lawful access mechanism, creating a consortium of IT providers, for providers that is resilient even from attacks from nation states, because that's the kind of world we live in. And so, and then you have some IT devices which are compliant, because this is not something we can solve with hardware, with software only. So these devices also need to have a special form factor, because mostly at least some will need to have a special form factor, because no one wants to carry an extra device. There's going to be an application of the standards also to simple application you can install on your phone, but which will instead refer to a server-side component which is certified to this level of security. Of course, these are going to be two different levels of security, but this is going to create a unique system which is not going to only require a specific hardware. So this is the overall diagram, which shows the assembly. This is the certification body. This is the assembly. This is Seevik, this public sphere that is created. National security agencies can request a judicial board, and the international judicial board makes a call about the request being valid or not. There are different nations that host server rooms and different keys, so that you would be resilient even from pressures or threats of a single nation. And so we will go through this later on. So the governance, we said that's key. So we want democratic accountability, technical proficiency, resiliency. That's why we have 25% a scientific and ethical board, global citizen assembly. So randomly selected citizens would get an opportunity to learn. And then we have parliamentarians. Nation states also are invited and are highly welcome, but initially they're not necessary. As soon as 8 of them in at least 3 nations will participate, then they will join in with a 30%, diluting the others. So we will not go through the paradigms. We will go through them later. We'll discuss them through the next panel, which we're quite late. I will share links to this. Okay, so no one wants to carry an extra device. So the form factor is going to be key to create this global digital sphere. So there's going to be devices of all form factor that will be compliant to this, but having a device which take advantage of this extreme minimization of features and performance to achieve this level of security is key, so that anyone can carry it in their wallet and anyone can carry it in the back of their phone. This is our vision. And so, of course, this is going to be applied to many different systems, but we want humans to be able to have this access. And so this is a scenario by which in some time in the future, anyone, any producer, any phone producer can actually embed these standards in the back of their phones. So I will fly through this. AI, quantum, and blockchain, they can all be used for good and for bad. Can add security, can provide problems. So they need to be used architecturally well, so that they're used as fallback, so they can only add security without adding uncertainty. So how far are we with this? So we had this research proposal that we discussed. We have huge amount of documentation produced. We have a POC device of the Civi phone that you saw before. We held all these events throughout these years. The spin-off startup has raised 180,000, has been working with clients, understanding a go-to-market, initial potential clients and news, political parties, banks. We talked to two of the 4 largest phone name makers as partners. We arrived among the top 5 or some of the greatest awards in Luxembourg and in Switzerland. We're working to top Swiss banks. And so that's what we're doing, both with the association, with the startup spin-off, which is a key element of our rollout. This is something you will be able to see yourself on the deck. So what I view forward is, with these events, we're actually finalizing the paradigms and the governance. We settled in Geneva, that's been formalized last week. We have these new great advisors helping us to even make this governance and paradigms even better and more resilient, because any mistake will have to live forever. So this is what we're doing now. We're in the process. We're in ongoing around 1 million of funding for the spin-off, and which will build which will build a first initial trustless computing based with technical partners which already are open source and high assurance. Then there's going to be tech partners joining in, hopefully nations. And we're talking to quite a few, and we'll look possibly in 2 years from now to have operational both the certification body and having first systems available in the market that comply to this system. Well, the startup spin-off is a critical thing, because the startup spin-off is something that it could create then a certain monopoly of private individuals. I don't know, the startup spin-off, which we spin off, could actually end up being controlled by Facebook or something like that. So you don't want that. So there is an agreement within the association and the startup by which mandatorily, as soon as the startup reaches $100 million in revenue, 51% of the control will be passed mandatorily to the certification body. So you will have this democratic body that we're setting out being ruling over this body. So by this formula, this enables us to attract private investment, but retain long-term democratic control of this and ensure and make guaranteed of that control. So in 2 words, initially it's going to be proven, go to market, really prove it on the market that you have this level of security. Once it does, everybody will want to have it if it's cheap, and you could just have it in the back of your phone. The 2 millimeters is going to be, you won't even notice in having it. And then it's going to be extended, the computing base and the standards to the root of trust of AI system. And that's where really a democratic and secure AI could actually come in. And that's where really, I think, the impact of our initiative can be extremely beneficial for humanity. So as a strategic positioning, there are many standards. The ITU, UN has standards, EU has a process, and our certification will be compliant with EIDAS, with common criteria. It will use the same language. It will not replicate anything that is already working, and it will also submit through this process. So nations that participate with us and partners would also submit to this process, but these processes are quite tainted, and somehow they make sure that nothing good or will come out of it because of the way the governance is structured. So we plan on actually having our organization being an international democratic organization, like some that are out there, and possibly even more democratic than those. And so the ultimate result will be that we will have freedom, democracy, and well-being for all. And we cannot promise the good looks of this lady, but we are quite confident that we will be able to give freedom, and democracy, and well-being, and make sure that the age of AI will be for good, rather than the worst nightmare that you can expect.